I'll never forget the way the lights hit Lucas's face that day. White-hot stage bulbs cooking a man already being slow-roasted by corporate humiliation. He stood behind the AV stack in his usual button-down, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. And then Jax, slicked up like a TED Talk con artist, stepped into frame and did what none of us thought he'd actually do. Fired Lucas. Right there, in front of 780 employees, half a dozen live investors, and every screen across the building. Let's give a round of applause, Jax beamed, to the legacy codebase we finally outgrew, including its author. It hit like a slap. People laughed, clapped even. I think some didn't know what they were clapping for, just that they were supposed to. I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I knew something Jax didn't. Lucas wasn't some outdated engineer coasting on tenure fumes. He was the foundation, like literally. The optimization engine that powered every routing decision, shipping recalibration, and delivery time estimate in our system. That was Lucas's baby, quietly written in the margins while the rest of us scrambled on Jax's timeline. It wasn't some open source snippet slapped together by interns. It was brilliant, bespoke, and his. And Jax had just tossed it like an expired yogurt. That's when Lucas looked up. No tears, no fight, just one small nod. Then he turned and walked off stage without a word. You ever feel a room shift? Not physically, but spiritually, like the air pulls tight and the universe holds its breath? That was the moment. Most didn't notice it. I did. I'd worked next to Lucas for 6 years. He never raised his voice, never took credit, but he also never let go of anything unless he meant to. And the second he disappeared behind the curtain, I felt something twist behind my ribs. By the way, if you've made it this far and haven't subscribed yet, it'd mean the world if you did. Only about 3% of people do, and every like or sub tells us this story matters to someone. That's what keeps us going. Back in the main hall, the event rolled on like nothing happened. Jax strutted across the stage with his smirk and his slides, talking about Series C, federal contracts, our revolutionary approach to logistics. But all I could think about was how Lucas never transferred the IP rights to that engine. I'd heard him joke about it once, months back, over lukewarm coffee. Funny thing about leverage, he'd said. People only look for it after they've thrown it away. At the time, I laughed. I thought it was just dry engineer humor. But now, that line clanged around my skull like a bell tolling something none of us were ready for. And maybe I should have spoken up. Maybe someone should have. But Lucas was already gone. Not gone. He still had access to every comet, every build tool, every endpoint. The only thing Jax stripped was the title. And even that wouldn't last long. Not once you understood the contract. Not once you read the fine print under Clause 11B. Not once you realized who really owned the bones of this company. I'd find out soon enough. We all would. About 3 weeks before the stage ambush, I caught a weird detail during a vendor compliance review. One of the newer legal interns, fresh from some Ivy, big suit energy but no real clue, forwarded me a checklist for one of our government clients. Pretty standard stuff: vendor credentials, encryption standards, back-end documentation. But buried halfway down, plain as day, was a request for proof of code licensing. Specifically, who held the rights to our optimization engine. I flagged it. Forwarded it to Jax, added a sticky note in the compliance deck that said, "Need to verify licensing status with engineering." I even CC'd Lucas, out of courtesy, even if he wasn't looped into anything these days. Hell, his Slack icon was always gray now. The guy had practically become a ghost in his own house. Jax's reply came in less than 10 minutes. Handled, legacy stuff. No need to loop Lucas into this anymore. Trust me. Trust me. The two least trustworthy words in tech, especially from a guy who once claimed to invent the term logistics AI during a podcast he hosted himself. Lucas didn't say anything publicly, but I caught him that afternoon in the break room, staring at his phone with that same stillness he always had before something important, like he was processing code in his head. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying not to pry. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "You ever watch a man light his own house on fire and call it a sunset?" I didn't know what the hell that meant, so I just shrugged. "Is that a yes?" Lucas didn't smile, didn't blink, just sipped his awful black coffee like it was a ritual. He never read the original contract. he finally said, more to himself than me. Later that night, I went digging, not because I didn't believe him, but because I needed to see it for myself. The original IP clause was buried in the early Zephyr Flow seed docs. Most of us had signed standard NDAs and transfer forms. Lucas hadn't. His agreement included something rare, a conditional licensing clause. The code, the entire engine, was technically his, licensed to Zephyrflow only under specific terms. Terms that, as of Jax's appointment, had never been renegotiated, never signed over, still valid, still binding, still his. And the kicker? There was a clause that said unauthorized commercial deployment without written consent would trigger revocation. It wasn't even in fine print. It was highlighted, bolded, probably added by Lucas himself. I remember sitting back from my monitor, skin cold. Jax had waved off legal review like it was a spam call, like Lucas was some harmless antique taking up server space. But that antique still had the master key. And the new CEO, he just walked into the lion's den wearing steak-scented cologne. What haunted me most wasn't the clause itself. It was the way Lucas had never mentioned it. Not once. He could have weaponized it, threatened, bragged. But instead, he just waited. Like he knew this day would come. Like he was giving Jax every possible opportunity to not be an idiot. And Jax, predictably, failed the test. In engineering, we always say the most dangerous bugs are the ones you ignore because the system still seems to work, until it doesn't. They called it Momentum Day, a full-on carnival of corporate ego with a DJ booth, catered sushi, and a stage so big it had its own lighting rig. I knew it was over the top the second I walked in and saw the fog machines warming up before 9 a.m. This wasn't a strategy update. It was a spectacle. Jax loved those, loved the buzz, loved the sound of his own voice echoing through the wireless mic clipped too tight to his collar. The man thought he was Steve Jobs with a startup vest and a worse haircut. Lucas, though? He looked like he'd been dragged in from another planet. Collared shirt, coffee-stained thermos, his employee badge still on a lanyard from 4 years ago. The badge photo didn't even match anymore. He looked older now. Not tired exactly, just finished. I saw him lean against a structural pillar off stage while Jax schmoozed around like a used car salesman on MDMA. And for a second, I thought maybe Jax would just ignore him, let the old guard fade away without drama. Wishful thinking. Midway through the keynote, Jax's voice dropped into that fake solemn tone he used whenever he was about to announce something big. And now, he grinned, it's time to talk about legacy. There were chuckles in the crowd. Someone clapped. Legacy code, legacy ideas, and yes, legacy personnel. The lights swung stage left. A spotlight landed on Lucas like a sniper scope. We thank Lucas Chen for his contributions to the early days of Zephyrflow, Jax said, the gratitude in his voice as fake as the veneers on his teeth. But we're building for the future now. Starting today, we've decided to sunset the role he's held. Let's all give a hand to moving forward. Silence at first, then polite applause, and then, God help me, cheering. I watched Lucas take it like a man being shot in the chest in slow motion. Not a flinch, not a twitch, just one long breath through his nose, and then he nodded. Once, like a formality, like he was acknowledging a bet finally lost. He turned and walked off stage, leaving Jax standing in the glow of manufactured applause. I couldn't move, couldn't clap. My palms itched like I was supposed to stop something and had missed my cue. Lucas disappeared into the side hallway where the AV racks were humming, and no one followed. No one even looked. Jax was back to slides and revenue projections within 2 minutes. But I kept my eyes on that hallway, because something about the way Lucas nodded, that single, quiet nod, hit me like a warning bell. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't resignation. It was confirmation. And later, when people asked when I knew, like really knew, that this whole house of cards was about to collapse, I always point to that moment. Not the screens going black, not the call from legal, not even the boardroom votes. No, it was the way Lucas walked off that stage like a man who just found the detonator he forgot he buried. 2 hours after he walked off that stage, Lucas's security badge still worked. That should have been the first clue. Jax had made such a public spectacle of cutting him loose, you'd think they would have disabled everything by the time he finished his post-keynote shrimp cocktail. But no, Lucas still had full admin access, still had commit rights, still had keys to the server room. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't send a goodbye email. He just vanished. Physically, emotionally, digitally. Like a ghost who knew where every wire was buried. By Monday, the murmurs started. It flagged several log entries with his user ID, routine stuff, except for the precision. He wasn't altering anything, just watching, accessing internal logs, downloading full audit trails, pulling timestamps, mapping where his code had been copied, rebranded, or repackaged for client demos. I know because I helped him once. Briefly. I didn't know the full scope back then, just that he asked me to confirm whether anyone had rerouted the dependency registry to the marketing build stack. They had. Which meant the demos, the flashy investor ones Jax loved to show off, were still using Lucas's engine. Unlicensed, deployed at scale, pushed across cloud tenants without so much as a courtesy flag. At first, I thought maybe it was just an oversight. But then I saw what Lucas found next. The filings. Investor filings, specifically the Series B and Series C documentation. In plain, bold type was the claim. All proprietary code owned by Zephyrflow Inc., a statement of total ownership, signed under penalty of perjury, certified by the CFO and General Counsel, and entirely false. That's when I realized this wasn't just an HR mess-up or a tech ethics issue. This was fraud, securities fraud, a misrepresentation of asset ownership to investors, government partners, and international regulators. And it was sitting there, buried in PDFs uploaded to our own internal investor portal. Lucas's attorney, a guy named Howard Bell, soft-spoken with teeth sharp enough to open a bank vault, reconfirmed the IP clause within 48 hours. The licensing rights had never transferred. The optimization engine remained the intellectual property of Lucas Chen, held under a revocable use agreement triggered by, and I quote, unauthorized reclassification of employment, unauthorized commercial redistribution, or public misrepresentation of authorship. Check, check, and check. Lucas had been documenting everything. Each unauthorized deployment, each updated line of code, every single commit attributed to someone else but still laced with his original architecture. He even flagged the Slack messages where marketing bragged about our proprietary ML routing platform during pitch prep. And through all of it, he never raised his voice, never called out Jax by name. He didn't need to. That's not how you handle an infestation. You don't stomp around with a broom. You lay out bait, you track the movement, and then, when it's time, you close the trap slowly, surgically. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. And watching him operate, quiet, methodical, relentless, it felt less like witnessing justice and more like watching a surgeon prep for a heart transplant, while the patient was still bragging about how great his cholesterol was. The thing about Lucas, what made him dangerous in a way no one at Zephyrflow seemed to understand, was that he never moved fast. He moved deliberately. While the rest of us were drinking Red Bulls and chasing sprint deadlines, Lucas was the kind of guy who planted trees knowing he'd never sit under the shade. So when I finally learned about the equity, I wasn't shocked. I was just pissed no one had seen it coming. It started with a flashback I wasn't supposed to have. One of those quiet moments buried years ago during Zephyrflow's early days, before Jax, before the Series A buzz, when we were just a dozen tired engineers trying to fix the freight industry one API at a time. Back then, Lucas negotiated his deal in silence. No bravado, no group emails, just a handshake meeting with the original founder and a single-page writer stapled to his consulting agreement. It granted him 14% equity. Not in his name. That would have been too easy. The shares were issued to a trust. Simple name. Generic Delaware shell. Nobody blinked. Nobody traced it, except him. Jax came on during the pivot when the board decided they needed vision more than architecture. He came with a scarf and a PowerPoint and a grin like a magician who just convinced you your wallet wasn't missing. And while he bulldozed departments and rebranded product names into buzzword soup, he never once asked about the cap table's fine print. Never checked who owned the quiet 14% hidden behind that trust name. It wasn't flashy. It didn't vote loud, but it sat there. Patient, silent, watching the valuation climb. Now, post-firing, Post-fraud, Lucas pulled the two pieces together. The IP ownership on one side, the shareholder rights on the other, two hands of the same body. And when you combine them, you didn't just have a guy with a licensing claim. You had a major stakeholder whose code was illegally powering the product that made the company worth anything at all. It was surgical, yes, but it was also elegant. Because by asserting his rights as the author, Lucas could revoke use of the engine, but by invoking his rights as a shareholder, he could also force disclosure, challenge governance, and, if necessary, call for a vote, not out of spite. Out of entitlement. He didn't want vengeance. He didn't want to burn the place down. He just wanted the truth on paper, that the company stood on code he built, value he helped create, and lies someone else told. One of the few times he spoke to me during this stretch, he said something I haven't forgotten. Control isn't about volume, he told me. It's about position. Rooks look harmless until you see where they sit. Jacks never saw it. Never checked. Never connected the name of the trust to the man he humiliated. And now that man had the board minutes, the IP logs, the clause violations, and the shares. 14% may not sound like much until it speaks with clarity, backed by legal standing and decades of receipts. This wasn't revenge. This was gravity, pulling everything back to its rightful center. It was scheduled innocuously. Just a routine system update logged in the maintenance calendar for Thursday at 11:15 a.m. A window carefully selected, short enough to raise no eyebrows, tucked between redundant failovers and labeled with one of our older dev cycle code names. Everyone ignored it. Everyone except Lucas. Because that 11:15 window? It coincided exactly with the start of Zephyrflow's Series C investor showcase, the one Jax had been hyping for months, the one live-streamed to federal partners, global clients, and a room full of checkbooks disguised as venture capitalists. He called it the future of logistics. It was held in the big conference auditorium we usually reserve for all hands or quarterly pep talks, but this time, the place had been transformed. Polished floors, mood lighting, velvet lanyards. They even brought in a scent diffuser, some overcompensating blend of eucalyptus and male desperation. I sat near the back, heart pounding, palms sweating through my notebook. Lucas wasn't there, but his fingerprints were. Jax took the stage just as the clock hit 11:09. He looked like a man who thought he owned the world, and maybe he did, in that moment. Perfect teeth. Designer blazer. He flashed that tech bro swagger that always played well in investor circles. Slides began clicking behind him. Buzzwords soared. Real-time route prediction, autonomous recalibration, military-grade security. And then, just as the demo launched, the heart of it, the optimization engine itself, everything froze. And I mean everything. Every display in the auditorium, every live stream feed, every backup screen, tablet, and mirrored laptop. All at once they went black. 3 seconds of silence. Then white text on a black background appeared, slowly, deliberately, like a verdict being typed live. Unlicensed, stolen, mine. 3 words, that's all. But you could feel the oxygen leave the room. Jax froze mid-sentence. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. One of the interns at the tech desk scrambled to reboot the system, but nothing responded. Behind the scenes, the rollback protocol had already kicked in, triggered by an IP rights assertion Lucas had filed the night before through an automated chain. The system was reverting in real time, code pathways unraveling, dependencies severing. The engine, the very thing Jax had built his pitch around, was gone. Not corrupted. Not hacked. Revoked. Across the venue, people stared at their devices like they'd personally failed. Investors whispered. Counsel from the DoD stood up and left without a word. And in the control room upstairs, someone finally shouted what everyone else had been thinking. "Where the hell is Lucas Chen?" I knew where he was. Sitting in a booth at that grimy diner off Highway 17, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and bottomless bad coffee. His laptop was open. His eyes were calm, and next to him was a printed copy of the cease and desist email that had triggered the display override, a file so clean and legally sound that even our outside counsel hadn't been able to poke a hole in it. He hadn't screamed, hadn't raised a fist. He'd spoken in code, in black and white pixels, across every screen, and watching it unfold, God, it was beautiful. Not because it was flashy, not because it was vengeful, because it was exact. controlled. I watched an empire wobble not with a bang, but with a deletion. A reminder that in tech, ownership isn't noise, it's proof, time-stamped, digitally signed, unmistakably his. The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The call came in at 2:07 p.m. sharp. I was still in the building pretending to organize feedback from the demo while everyone else tried not to hyperventilate. The office looked like it had been hit by a very polite tornado. No broken furniture, no screaming, just dozens of professionals pretending this wasn't the most expensive disaster of their careers. Our general counsel, Meredith Voss, had retreated to her glass fishbowl office with the blinds drawn. I saw her pacing, headset on, hair yanked into a stress bun. Every few minutes she'd stop, scribble something on a yellow legal pad, then tear it off like it personally offended her. Lucas, meanwhile, was back at the diner. He'd ordered pancakes this time, probably cold by now. He picked up the call on the second ring. "Lucas, it's Meredith. We need to talk," she said, skipping pleasantries. Her voice was fraying at the edges. Lucas didn't ask how she got his number. He didn't rush her, just waited. "There seems to be an unexpected issue with the optimization engine," she continued. "There are some questions around licensing, and it's Clause 11B, Lucas said, folding his napkin. "Look at the last page of my original engagement agreement. You'll see the licensing terms. It's still in effect." Silence. Then he heard the frantic click of keyboard keys through her headset. She was pulling it up. "And while you're there," he added, "pull the transfer agreement draft. You'll see the signature line is blank. Always was." More silence, then a breath like someone realizing their parachute hadn't deployed. "There's a screenshot circulating," Meredith admitted, voice quieter now. "The message on the screens. Was that you?" Lucas didn't gloat, didn't deny. Instead, he tapped a button on his laptop and sent her a single image file, a dated snippet of the licensing clause underlined in red with one line highlighted for emphasis. "Unauthorized commercial deployment triggers immediate and total revocation of license." It wasn't even the original document. It was a screenshot of the clause as she had sent it to him in 2018, time-stamped, metadata intact. "Is this revenge?" she asked, too tired to filter anymore. "No," he said simply. "It's math." A pause, then the soft sound of resignation. "What do you want?" He could have said anything. A dollar figure, a title. Jax's resignation in a glitter frame. But Lucas wasn't here for the theater. "I'm willing to license the engine," he said. "Non-exclusive, time-boxed, commercial rights only, no derivative claims." "And the price?" He quoted a number that would have made me spit out my drink if I'd been sitting there. But Meredith didn't laugh. She didn't protest, because she'd already done the math. Without that engine, we were a glossy shell with pitch decks and no product, a house with no wiring, a billion-dollar valuation propped up by one assumption, that the thing making it all run belonged to us. It didn't. And now we were going to have to buy it back from the man we fired on stage like a leftover filing cabinet. He didn't slam the door. He held it open, at a price, and honestly, it was generous, because if Lucas had wanted revenge, he could have let us burn. Instead, he was offering fire insurance. The premium just happened to be written in ink we couldn't afford to ignore. The emergency board meeting wasn't on the calendar. No Outlook invite, no company-wide memo, just a quiet buzz that spread like electrical static. Subtle, tense, undeniable. By 6:30 p.m., all C-suite had gone silent. Jax had vanished into the executive wing. PR had gone dark. IT stopped replying. The investor relations Slack channel read like a morgue. And then the real players arrived. 4 board members in suits that didn't wrinkle, expressions that didn't blink. They moved through the building like surgeons prepping for amputation. They weren't here to troubleshoot. They were here to cut. Inside the boardroom, Jax stood alone at the head of the table. Same guy, same blazer, but the charisma was gone. The teeth stayed, but the smile didn't. He tried to open with charm. "Let's all remember this is just a small hiccup in an otherwise strong..." But no one took the bait. Meredith sat 2 seats down, face blank, legal pad untouched. She wouldn't save him this time. They brought Lucas in by conference line. Just a plain audio dial-in, no camera. No theatrics. "Mr. Chen," the chairman said, voice clipped. You hold 14%, is that correct? I do, Lucas replied. His tone was smooth, bored almost, like this wasn't even his first meeting of the day. And you filed a formal dispute asserting that the core optimization engine was misrepresented in our IP disclosures? Yes. And you've offered to license it under conditions? I have. 3 of them. Silence. Then a nod from the chairman. Go ahead. Lucas didn't hesitate. 1. I require a formal correction issued to all investors and federal clients acknowledging my authorship and ownership of the engine. 2. I want a non-negotiable licensing agreement in place before any further commercial deployment. 3. He paused, just a beat. I want Mr. Redmond removed, effective immediately. That hit like a brick in a baptism. Jax tried to laugh. Are we seriously? This is a witch hunt, right? I mean, we're going to let a terminated employee dictate executive. You weren't terminated, Lucas said calmly. You just assumed I wouldn't speak. The board chair raised a hand. Let's vote. And they did. Each one, name by name, 5 in favor, 1 abstain. When it got to Meredith, she looked down at the table for a long time before she whispered, in favor. Jax opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mr. Redmond, the chair said flatly, please collect your things. Security will accompany you. I saw him later in the lobby, hands shaking, sunglasses on inside like that made him invisible. He didn't look at anyone, not even when his keycard failed to buzz the elevator. Back in the boardroom, Lucas stayed on the line. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, your terms are accepted. We'll finalize the documents this evening. Lucas didn't gloat, didn't thank them. He simply said, I'll have a revised license packet on your desk within the hour. Click. Line went dead. It wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't revenge porn. It was clean, cold, and final, like someone sanding a jagged edge until the surface no longer cut, just reminded you it could have. There was no applause, no celebration, just a room full of professionals who finally saw the scaffolding they'd taken for granted, and the man who held the bolts together from the shadows. Watching Jax fall wasn't satisfying. It was overdue. They resumed the investor pitch the next morning at 10 a.m. sharp. Same room, same screen, but the energy had shifted entirely. Gone was the velvet lanyard arrogance, the startup glitz. No more hype music, no fog machines, no signature cocktails with logistics-themed names. This time, the lights were neutral, the air sober. The kind of room where truth showed up with its sleeves rolled. The COO stood at the podium, clearly shaken but rehearsed. She adjusted the mic, glanced down at a printed statement, and began to read. In light of yesterday's events, she said, steady but flat, Zephyrflow confirms that the core optimization engine is now licensed by its original author, who retains a 14% equity stake via a registered holding trust. The terms of the agreement include non-exclusivity, ongoing maintenance oversight, and correction of prior authorship representations, effective immediately. No spin, no applause, just black and white acknowledgement of something that had always been true. Lucas never appeared on screen. No victory lap, no monologue. He didn't attend the follow-up meetings, didn't post on LinkedIn. The man simply returned to his quiet routines. Pancakes, terminal windows, a quiet login timestamp at 4:41 a.m. that only a few of us would recognize. His code was back in the stack, humming with efficiency like it never left. A few days later, one of the junior engineers, new kid, still smelled like orientation coffee, was reassigned to clean out the now empty office where Lucas used to sit. Tucked between an old Ethernet cable and a backup SSD was a sticky note, aged at the corners, barely sticking to the desk. It read, "Useless is what they call what they don't understand. I just spoke in code. No signature, no date, but we knew." The engineers who stayed began whispering it like a proverb. Someone turned it into a Slack emoji. HR tried to kill the meme. It didn't die. In the months that followed, Zephyrflow stabilized. The headlines faded. New demos were clean. The company survived, but it never forgot. Lucas didn't torch the building. He didn't bankrupt anyone. He just put the truth on paper where everyone could finally see it. Ownership, it turns out, isn't about volume, or titles, or who gets to hold the mic. It's about knowing where the value begins and having the receipts when it matters. Funny thing about ownership. Sometimes the ones who built it don't need to raise their voice, just their pen.